Hi, and welcome to jlvphoto's Photo Focus. In this video, I'm going to be talking about lens reversing rings, or as Nikon calls them, macro adapter rings. I'm going to be talking about the BR-2, which was the original macro adapter ring that dates from the 60s, and also the BR-2A. They're essentially the same, except that if you're going to mount the lens on an autofocus camera, whether film or digital, you need to use the BR-2A because the BR-2 can damage the autofocus contacts on the camera. The BR-2A will work fine with cameras dating back to the Nikon F to the present DSLRs. So let's open up this BR-2A and I'll show you what it does. Okay, so one side mounts to the camera, has the Nikon standard bayonet, Nikon F bayonet mount. The other side has a 52 millimeter male filter thread. All right, so I'm going to mount this lens on this 20 millimeter f4. All right, it screws right in to the 52 millimeter threads. And now it enables us to mount the lens in reverse on a camera with Nikon F mount. Okay, so I'm going to mount this on this Nikon F. Okay, so now the lens is in reverse. Now, we then remove the lens cap, and that's all we need to do, and we can shoot macro photos with this arrangement. With the 20 millimeter lens in reverse and the lens set to infinity, we could get a magnification of 3.4 times life size, okay, which gives you, extreme magnification. And the thing with this, however, is you can't really use the focus ring to focus. What you need to do in order to focus is move the entire assembly back and forth. And we could use this macro focusing attachment. Okay, the camera mounts here, and then by turning this knob, we can move the camera back and forth to focus. Now, I took some pictures with this setup, with the 20 millimeter, attached to a Nikon mirrorless camera using the F to Z adapter. And using this 20 millimeter lens, I had 2 inches of working distance from the back of the lens, in this case, to the stamp that I photographed. Now, a few things about using a macro adapter. Obviously, there is no meter connection, okay? There is no automatic diaphragm. So you must manually select your aperture. These adapters will only work with lenses with an aperture ring. Won't work on the newer lenses that have no aperture ring. But they work fine on the mirrorless cameras using the F to Z adapter. So the BR-2A is for lenses with a 52 millimeter filter attachment size. Nikon also makes the BR-5, which is for lenses with a 62 millimeter front filter thread. And the way that works, I don't have a BR-5 to show you, but with the BR-5, you simply thread that into the 62 millimeter threads on the lens, and then add the BR-2A to enable you to mount it on the camera. So what is the advantage of a reverse adapter? Why not just use extension tubes? Well, when you're in magnifications greater than 1:1, the reversing the lens will give you an overall sharper picture, especially out to the edges. And the reverse adapters really work well with wide-angle lenses. On this 20, you can see I was able to get to a 3.4 times magnification. A 24 will get you 2.6 times magnification. A 28 will get you to 2.1 times. The 35 millimeter 2.0 at 1.6 times, and I also took some pictures with that lens. And with the 35 millimeter 2.0, let me just get this lens off. And I'm going to unscrew this from the reverse adapter. And I'm going to show you here, I'm going to place it on my 35 2.0. And again, this gave me, by using this on the 35 2.0, this gave me a magnification of 1.6 times. Okay, and had a working distance of about 2.5 inches. Okay, and here's just mounting it to the F to Z adapter. So you can see it will work fine with a mirrorless camera. If I had used extension tubes, let's say, to get me to, now here's an example of one of Nikon's PK, this is a 14 millimeter extension tube. But if I had used extension tubes, I would have been closer, for example, with that 20 millimeter lens, I would have been closer than 2 inches to my subject. The more room between the subject and the lens, the better, you know, for lighting, so you don't cast the shadow of your lens on the subject. Now with a 50 millimeter 1.8, reversing it, you only get to half life size. As I showed in my video comparing the 51.4 and the 52.0, you do gain a little bit more sharpness by using the lens in reverse than using it mounted the correct way, the traditional way, on extension tubes. So if you like macro photography and you want to get really close and get some high magnification, a reverse adapter is a very inexpensive way to do that, and you also get, you know, excellent quality. Again, just remember that you must have a lens that has an aperture ring, that these adapters work best with lenses between 20 and 60 millimeters. You're losing the automatic diaphragm, so you must control your aperture manually, okay? And the other thing is that these high magnifications, it's not very easy to focus. Just a slight movement, very slight movement of the camera, the tripod, the subject will throw it out of focus. There's very, very limited depth of field. So you want to make sure everything is secure, your camera is secure to the tripod, to your focusing rail, and I highly recommend the focusing rail. Now the other option would be have everything set up and move your subject back and forth, depending on what the subject is. Now with this postage stamp, I just taped it was a first aid cover, I just taped the first aid cover to a box, and I was able to move that back and forth to help with focus, but then also tweaked it with the focusing rail. But again, a very, very slight movement will, and you'll be out of focus. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention here. There's something called the BR-2, all right? So if you have this lens mounted in reverse, all right, so basically, I'm not going to mount it to the camera at this point, but here's the camera, there's the lens. Your rear element, which now becomes the front element, is pretty exposed. And also, what happens if you want to use a filter? What happens if you want to attach a filter to that lens? Well, Nikon makes something called the BR-2. I'm not sure if these are made any longer, but you could pick them up. So it's a BR-2. So the BR-2 has a female bayonet mount, and you simply mount the lens to the BR-2. All right, so what does that do? Well, it gives you a little bit of protection for your lens, acts as a small lens hood. It also gives you 52 millimeter female threads, and you could screw in a filter. And of course you could add a lens shade for some further protection to this arrangement. However, probably not a good idea, because now, because of the addition of a lens hood, you're going to have no working space between your subject and the lens. Now these BR-2 rings and the BR-2A can also be used on extension tubes to get even greater magnification. So with that 20mm lens, you get to 3.4 times life size. Well, if you added extension tubes, okay, back here, so where's that extension tube? All right, so I could add extension, okay, and attach this assembly to the camera, or rather than an extension tube, I could add this to a bellows and get even greater magnification. Again, the thing though is how much working space will you have, and as I said earlier, the greater the magnification, the more precise you have to be with your focus and make sure everything is locked down. But the world looks very different at high magnification. As you can see in these postage stamps, you could see the individual dots in the image, and things look, like I said, things look a lot different, and you could get some really interesting pictures through experimentation. Just one other thing, just by comparison, at 1:1 with a 60mm macro lens, which the 60mm Nikon AF macro does focus down to 1:1. This lens here, the 60mm focuses down to 1:1. At 1:1, the working distance from the front of the lens to the subject is 3 inches. And of course, if you used a 105 macro, that distance will be greater, giving you more options for lighting. So you can find these BR-2 rings fairly easily on eBay. Again, I'm not sure if they're made anymore. They may be. But again, it's kind of a thing that you could buy it used. There's no moving parts, and they're made of metal, so they will last forever. Now, one other thing I should add is, this adapters will not only work on Nikon lenses, they'll work on any lenses with a 52mm adapter. The BR-2 will work. So here's a Canon FD lens, and let me just get this adapter off this Nikon 35mm lens. Okay, this will screw into the front of this Canon new FD 50mm 1.4. You could use a step-up ring or step-down ring and experiment with other lenses. These reverse adapters work best for high magnification with wide-angle lenses, but again, you could use them on any prime lens up to 60mm. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope it will spark your curiosity and your creativity, and pick one up and see what you can do. Experiment with objects around the house, in the garden, and good luck with this. Right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I come out with a new video every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. So if you are new to 35mm photography, or you know someone who is, every first Wednesday of the month, I am publishing a beginner's 35mm film photography series. So look for that. All right, thank you, and I will talk to you next time.